My name is Wallis Townsend. I'm 38 years old, and 3 days after I wired $8.8 million to buy my mother-in-law's dream home, my husband told me I wasn't invited to his sister's wedding. He said it at our kitchen counter, looking me straight in the eye, in the voice he uses for scheduling. My mom doesn't want you there. She says you're embarrassing. 9 years of marriage, 9 years of writing checks for my husband's family, quietly, the way they preferred it. And that Friday evening, holding a wine glass I had paid for in a house I had paid for, I learned exactly what all of it had bought me. I said the only thing there was left to say. Got it. 1 hour later, I picked up the phone and made a single call. No shouting, no threats, barely 3 minutes long. And what that call set in motion is why the Bennett family will never say my name the same way again. It's at tables that were never set for them. If stories like this keep you company, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Before that phone call can make sense, I have to show you where my hands came from. When I was 14, my mother cleaned office buildings at night in a mill town upstate, and I cleaned them with her. Dell Townsend, 5'2", bad knees even then, a voice like gravel and honey. We'd ride the service elevator up at 9 p.m. with a cart and a little radio, and she'd take the east wing and I'd take the west, and we'd meet in the middle around midnight. The smell of ammonia still calms me down, which tells you something about how love gets wired. My mother had one rule, and she said it every night, at every door, like a prayer. Leave it cleaner than you found it. She meant the offices. It took me 24 more years to learn she'd handed me away to leave a marriage. These days, my company cleans hospitals and airports in 3 states, 1,100 employees. My name is on the side of 200 vans. I have sat across the table from bank presidents who wanted my business and city councils that gave me plaques, and I can tell you the exact price per square foot of making a building shine. Money opens most doors in this country. I believed that for a long time, because for a long time it was true. Then I married into Charleston, into a family with a name instead of a fortune, and I found the doors money doesn't open. I know because I tried. I tried with 8 figures. What I'm going to tell you is what it costs to learn that lesson, and what I did on the morning I finally graduated. Here's the thing. Poverty teaches a smart little girl, and teaches her so early she thinks it's her own idea. You are kept where you are useful. Nobody said it to me cruelly. Nobody said it at all. I just watched. Our landlady knocked $30 off the rent. The winter my mother started sweeping the building's stairwells for free, and we stopped being late on the first of the month, and I took notes the way children do, without knowing I was taking them. In high school, I got to stay late in the chemistry lab because I wiped down the benches and racked the glassware, and the teacher wrote me the letter that got me the scholarship. Help enough, scrub enough, show up enough, and people find you a corner to stand in. It's not a bad lesson for business. I built a company on being more useful than anyone else in the room. But somewhere in there, the wires crossed, the way they do, and useful stopped being what I did and started being what I was. I have never once arrived at anyone's home empty-handed. I have never in my adult life let another person pick up a check. And I mean, never. Friends have wrestled me for it and lost. For years I called that generosity. My mother, who knew better, called it something else. "Baby," she said to me once, watching me tip a waitress the size of the bill, "you give like you're paying somebody back." I laughed it off. She didn't. She'd spent 30 years cleaning other people's buildings without ever once confusing that with belonging to them. Her daughter walked into the finest family in Charleston and confused exactly that. I started Townsend Building Services at 22 with a used van, a floor buffer bought at auction, and my mother's rule painted inside my skull. First contract? A dentist's office, $300 a month. I did the work myself at night and ran the paperwork by day. At 25, I had 6 crews. At 30, I had the county hospital, and the night we won that bid, my mother cried into her coffee because she had scrubbed that hospital's lobby as a temp in 1994, and they had shorted her pay. 16 years after the van, my company holds contracts across 3 states, hospitals, An airport concourse, 2 university systems. I say this without apology. Every dollar has a work order behind it. My hands show the history. There's a callus at the base of each palm that never left, souvenirs of a floor buffer that used to buck like a horse. For years, I noticed rich women noticing my hands. I never hid them. New money, I eventually learned, is what old families call money that comes with labor still attached, the way you'd say a fish came with the head still on. They find it a little vulgar. They also, I would discover, find it spendable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At 28, my company won the janitorial contract for a gleaming wealth management firm downtown, the kind of place with oil paintings of dead founders and carpet you could sleep on. I walked the building myself before we bid it, counting sinks, measuring glass. A man stepped out of the corner office while I was measuring his window, and he smiled like the morning was a private joke between us. And that was Ethan Bennett. Ethan Bennett was 30 then, a wealth advisor with his family's surname doing half his job for him, and I want to be fair. He was easy to love. He was tall and unhurried, and he listened with his whole face, and on our first dinner he asked more questions about industrial floor care than any human being has ever sincerely asked, and I talked. And he watched me talk like I was the most interesting acquisition in the Southeast. He was proud of me in public, I'll give him that. Self-made, he'd say, presenting me at parties. My wife built her company from one van, and people would coo, and I would smile, and it took me years to hear what was off in it. He said it the way you'd describe a fascinating documentary, something he'd watched, something that had happened over there, to someone else, before he arrived at the theater. There were other flags, small ones, folded neatly. He'd reach over and straighten my collar before we walked into a room, every room, like a man adjusting a display. He taught me which fork, which vowels, which charities mattered. And I let him, because I was 28 and in love, and I had spent my whole life believing rooms had rules and the rules could be learned. And here is the truth I'd rather not say out loud. Some part of me, the 14-year-old with the spray bottle, was thrilled. The Bennetts of Charleston, a name like polished brass, a family with a pew, with a street they used to own, with 300 years of belonging in a city built on knowing who belongs. I thought I was marrying a harbor. I was applying for a job. His mother received me, that is the correct verb, at her apartment on Broad Street, all silver service and portrait light. Sandra Bennett was 63 this past spring, which made her 53 then, and she is, I will say this forever, magnificent. Posture like a consequence. Pearls she was born knowing how to wear. She poured tea with a wrist so practiced it looked like the cup was pouring itself, and she asked me precisely one question about my family. "And your people are from where?" she said. I said a mill town upstate, and that my mother had cleaned commercial buildings for 30 years, because I do not launder my mother for anyone's parlor. Sandra's smile did not move. Nothing about her moved. She simply set the question down like a fish knife she wouldn't be needing, and began speaking about the yacht club's restoration fund. I almost admired it. You could have run a seismograph under that woman and gotten nothing. It was only later, at the engagement party, that I understood what had actually happened at that tea. I overheard her introducing me to a cluster of silver heads across the room. "This is Wallis," she said. "She's in facilities." In facilities. 1,100 employees, 3 states, and the woman had filed me in a drawer between the caterer and the man who details her car. I stood there holding my champagne, and something in me, the girl who counted sinks, did the math I was always going to do. She just needs time, I decided. Time. And enough kindness. And enough usefulness. I had spent my whole life earning my way into rooms. I figured this room worked like the others. That arithmetic cost me 9 years. We married when I was 29. In a ceremony, Sandra gently annexed one committee at a time. I picked my battles, and I want the record to show I won the one that mattered. The seating chart came out with my mother at table 9, behind a pillar, and I moved Del Townsend to table 1, at my right hand. And when Sandra saw the revision, she smiled the way Frost smiles and said, "How lovely." My mother wore her good blue dress and was the first one dancing. I keep that picture on my desk. Now, because you will wonder, and because you should. I was not a fool walking in. I had a company older than the relationship, and I kept it fenced. My business, my accounts, my house in Mount Pleasant that I'd bought at 30, all of it stayed in my name, separate, papered, clean, the way my accountant and my lawyer Landon Price had drilled into me since my first million. There was no prenup, and here's the joke of that. The Bennetts never asked for one. It genuinely did not occur to them that the risk in this merger might run in my direction. The name was the asset, you see. I was the liquidity. I saw the shape of it even then. I'm a woman who reads contracts for a living, including the unwritten kind. I saw it, I noted it, and I decided love would renegotiate it over time. That was the one clause I got wrong. You can fence a company, you can fence a bank account. I never did figure out how to fence the part of me that believed enough giving would eventually convert into belonging. That account stayed joint. The withdrawals started in year 1, and they never once looked like withdrawals. They looked like emergencies, and then, like traditions. The roof of the Bennett family's charity hall failed the summer after our honeymoon, $46,000, and Ethan sat on the edge of our bed turning his phone over in his hands like a boy, and I said I'd handle it, and the relief on his face paid me better than any thank you. That's the hook, right there, in case you're taking notes. The relief. Then it was Brooke's graduate tuition. $118,000 over 2 years, because a Bennett doesn't take loans, though apparently a Bennett's sister-in-law takes invoices. Then the restoration of the family cemetery plot, $27,500, which I am apparently the only person alive to find funny. I paid to landscape the graves of ancestors who would not have let my mother through their front door. Gala tables. Auction lots. Ethan's car eventually. When the firm had a thin year. Every check was received the same way. A brief, warm, complete thank you. And then a small silence. Like a door being shut softly so the help wouldn't hear. Money came into that family the way it goes into a poor box. Gratefully. And without introductions. And I kept writing them. Year after year, because each one bought a warm month, a good Christmas, a stretch where Sandra used my actual name at dinner. If you've never been hungry for a family, I can't explain it. And if you have, I don't need to. 9 years, I banked a household that never once put me on the deed of it. And then, in the spring of my 9th year, Sandra found the house. Before the house, though, I owe you the sentence that explains this whole family, and it was handed to me at a Heritage Society gala in my 3rd married year. I'd underwritten the evening, the flowers, the quartet, the shrimp, and a features reporter from the local magazine asked me, pleasantly, what a night like this costs. And I told her, pleasantly, because I come from people who answer questions. 90 seconds later, Sandra's hand closed on my elbow like a silk tourniquet, and she steered me to the cloakroom alcove, and she was not angry. I want to be precise. She was instructive. She looked at me the way a headmistress looks at a promising scholarship girl, and she said, "Money is loud, dear. A name is quiet." Then she patted my arm once and returned to the party, spine first. I stood there among the coats and understood several things at speed. My generosity was not, to this family, affection. It was noise. Necessary noise, the way a generator is necessary at a garden party. Essential, and kept behind a hedge. The checks weren't building me a bridge into the Bennetts. They were the fee the Bennetts charged for tolerating the sound of me. I understood it. I filed it. And, this is the part I'd take back, I decided it was a phase. Chapter 2 of the Scholarship Girl's Handbook. When the room resists you, give more. So I gave more. Louder, in the only language I had, while working on becoming quieter in theirs. If you had asked me what I was doing, I'd have said investing. My mother would have had a different word. But I'd stopped running my books past my mother. You learn a family's true accounting at their Sunday table, and the Bennetts' Sunday table sat 12 under a chandelier older than my hometown. This particular Sunday, Brooke, my sister-in-law, 27 then, lovely and weightless as a ribbon, had just gotten engaged to a Whitfield, which in Charleston is like a ribbon marrying a flag. She was showing the ring around the table, and the ring came to me, and I said what you say, and my hands did what hands do, which is exist. And Ethan's uncle, 3 glasses in, looked at my hands holding that little velvet box and said, "Well, those have seen some work. You could sand a deck with those." And the table laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. That's the thing I need you to understand. It was worse. It was comfortable. It was the laugh of people confirming something they all already knew, the way you'd laugh at a joke about the weather. Sandra smiled into her tea. Brooke said, "Oh, stop," in the voice that means keep going. And my husband, the man who told strangers self-made like a brag, laughed too. Not loudly, just enough. I looked at my hands, the calluses at the base of each palm, my mother's knuckles arriving early on my fingers, and I did something I had never done at that table. I started to slide them into my lap. Halfway down, some 14-year-old in me grabbed the wheel. I brought them back up. I laid them flat on that white tablecloth. Both of them, scars and calluses and all, and I left them there through dessert like 2 signed affidavits. And nobody said another word about them. It's the proudest small thing I've ever done. If you've ever hidden your hands, the proof you built your own life, because somebody made you ashamed of the building, tell me in the comments, because I read every one of them. And subscribe, friend, because the wire transfer is coming, and you'll want to be sitting down. Every family has a wound it dresses daily, and the Bennett's wound had an address. The house on Lagar Street. 3 stories of black shutters and old brick, a garden wall with a wrought iron gate, a name plaque older than the Republic. Bennett's built it, Bennett's filled it for 6 generations, and 22 years ago, Bennett's lost it, when Ethan's late father discovered that a name cannot actually be collateralized, and the debts came due. The family never said sold. They said, "We let the house go." Passive voice, an act of weather. Sandra had moved to the apartment on Broad Street and hung the portraits closer together so the walls would look full. And every week, I have seen this with my own eyes, she walked past that gate on her way from church, not slowing, chin level, the way you walk past an ex you still love. Then last spring, the house came on the market. $8.8 million. And Sandra Bennett, a woman who had never telephoned me in 9 years, who summoned, through Ethan, the way you'd send for a tradesman, invited me to tea. Just the 2 of us. She asked after my mother's knees. She used my name 4 times. She was warm the way March is warm, and I sat in that parlor knowing exactly, to the decimal, what the warmth was for. And here is the confession this whole story turns on. It worked anyway. Knowing better, seeing the hook, reading the invoice behind the smile, none of it mattered, because the smile was aimed at the one account I'd never learned to fence. The girl who believed useful could be converted into loved. That girl heard the kettle whistle and thought, finally. Ethan ran the campaign for a year, and he ran it well, because persuading people to move money is literally his profession. It came in waves, each with its own brochure. First, the investment case. Charleston real estate only rises. The LLC could hold it. Think of it as a position wall, not a purchase. Then the peace case. One gesture, and every cold Sunday, every seating chart, every in facilities. Settled, done, paid off forever. And then one night, quietly, lying in the dark, the case he'd been saving, the one aimed between my ribs. After this, he said, nobody in that family will ever be able to say you're not one of us. I lay there in the dark next to 9 years of wanting exactly that sentence to be true, and I felt the last fence post come out of the ground. My chief operating officer, Marisol Vega, who has run my accounts and read my moods for 12 years, put down her coffee when I told her, and looked at me the way she looks at a bid that's wrong in the footnotes. "You're not buying a house," she said. "You're buying a seat. And seats like that get repossessed." I told her I'd structured it so it couldn't be. She said, "I'm not talking about the deed," and went back to her coffee, having said, as usual, the entire truth in 11 seconds. I heard her. I want that on the record too. I heard her, I understood her, and I proceeded anyway, because knowing your weakness and being free of it are two different net worths. But I proceeded my way. If I was going to buy my seat at the Bennett table, I was at least going to own the table it came with. Here's how you spend $8.8 million on people you don't fully trust. If you're me, the house would be bought by Townsend Holdings, my LLC. Title in the company's name, full stop. Sandra would have it for life. Her furniture, her portraits, her garden, her plaque. What she would not have was a deed. No transfer, no trust in her name. And, Landon Price insisted, bless his flinty heart, a termination clause that let the buyer walk any time before closing. Standard diligence language. I remember initialing it the way you buckle a seatbelt in a parking lot. Routine, faintly silly, surely unnecessary. Ethan agreed to all of it so fast it should have told me something. The family didn't want ownership, I realize now. Ownership comes with property taxes. They wanted restoration. The gate, the name, the walk from church with the destination again. Sandra signed her occupancy papers at her writing desk with a pearl-handled pen, thanked me for precisely 2 sentences, and offered me tea from the good service. And I understood I had just watched a queen accept tribute and confuse it, sincerely and completely, with taxes owed to her. The wire went out on a Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. $8,800,000 from my account to escrow, closing set for the first week of July. 3 weeks off, conveniently after Brooke's wedding, so the family could announce the homecoming at the height of the season. I watched the confirmation load on my screen, and Marisol watched me from the doorway, saying nothing at industrial strength. Tuesday. Remember that it was a Tuesday. Because on Friday evening, at my own kitchen counter, I asked my husband one small question about an invitation. But first, Tuesday night. Because Tuesday night matters more than I knew. I couldn't sleep. Not worry, exactly. Altitude. You don't move a number like that and feel nothing. Around midnight, I went down to my office and opened the safe, and I took out the green ledger. You need to know about the green ledger. It's a plain accountant's book, cloth spine gone soft at the corners, and I've kept it since I was 22. Every personal outlay over $500, entered by hand, because my mother taught me you don't really know a number until you've written it. Most pages are boring. Tuition for my crew, Leeds kids, the roof I put on my mother's house. And then there are the Bennett pages. 9 years of them. I sat there at midnight and read my own handwriting, line after line. Charity Hall roof, $46,000. Brooke, graduate tuition, $118,000. Cemetery restoration, $27,500. Gala, auction, gala. Ethan, vehicle. And at the bottom of the newest page in ink from that very morning, $8,800,000. I had always thought of that book as a diary of love in the only dialect I spoke fluently. Sitting there at midnight, I read it cold. The way I'd read a stranger's books in a due diligence file, and a completely different document looked back at me. Deposits, recurring, payments, scheduled, consideration given in exchange for, and there the column went blank. I couldn't write the word for what I'd been buying because I couldn't prove delivery. Any auditor will tell you what a ledger like that is called. It's not a diary. It's a rent book. I didn't say the words that night. I closed the book, put it back in the safe, and went up to bed. 3 days later, my husband said them for me. The invitations to Brooke's wedding went out that same week. Heavy cream cardstock, gold foil, hand calligraphed by a woman in Savannah who has a 9-month waiting list. I know all this because Charleston knows all this. The things were being photographed and posted by every recipient like diplomatic credentials. The Whitfield Bennett wedding, 200 guests, the yacht club, the season's crescendo. I checked our mail Wednesday. Bills, a seed catalog. I checked Thursday. A bank statement. A coupon flyer that misspelled my street. I stood at my own mailbox in the low gold evening light. and I gave that empty box every benign explanation in stock. Married couples get one invitation, obviously. Ethan's had probably gone to the firm or, wait, hadn't he mentioned something surely? The calligrapher was behind. The postal service is what it is. I texted Brooke a warm little congratulations, gorgeous invitation suite, saw it online, with a heart, the punctuation of plausible deniability. My phone showed me the message going read. Then it showed me nothing at all. For 2 days. From a girl whose thank you notes arrive before you've fully finished giving her the thing. I told Marisol about the mailbox at lunch Friday, breezy, like a funny nothing. She did not laugh. She looked at me across her salad for a long moment, 12 years of my books behind her eyes, and she said, "Ask him straight, Wallis. Tonight. You've never once been afraid of a number. Don't start with this one." She was right, and I knew it, and I drove home rehearsing the question like a girl rehearsing a speech at the bottom of the stairs. It's a small question, it turns out. Where's my invitation? You can hold a small question all day. It's the answer that needs a place to sit down. Friday, 6:40 in the evening, my kitchen. I can tell you where everything was. Ethan at the island in his rolled shirt sleeves, opening a Pinot Noir I'd been saving, because he liked opening the good bottles on Fridays. His week deserved it. The reasoning went, and I never audited the reasoning. Me at the counter with the mail I'd carried in, one more day of nothing in it. I asked it lightly. I gave him every off-ramp in the delivery. "Hey, Brooke's invitations are all over the internet and ours hasn't shown up. Do I need to shake down our mail lady?" And my husband did not reach for any of the off-ramps. He set down the corkscrew, and he looked me in the eye. I'll give him that. Unlike his mother, he did it with his face forward. And he said it in the tone of a man reporting a scheduling conflict. "There's no invitation coming, Wall. My mom doesn't want you there. She says you're embarrassing." The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked around its little circle. 72 hours, I thought, with a strange, calm, arithmetical part of my brain that has made me a great deal of money. 72 hours ago, I wired $8.8 million to buy his mother a house. He was still talking, I realized. "It's one afternoon, Wall. It's her day. Mom just wants it smooth. Don't make it a thing. Don't make it a thing. 9 years, $400,000 of things, and one house with a gate. And the sum of all of it stood in my kitchen in rolled sleeves, asking me to not make it a thing." I looked at my husband for a long, quiet moment, and I said, "Got it." Here's what got it looked like from the outside, according to the outside. My husband says I nodded, picked up my wine, and asked what he wanted for dinner, and that we ate, and that I seemed fine. He would tell his mother later that week that I took it well. I want you to sit with that sentence the way I've sat with it. She took it well. What happened on the inside was quieter and much larger. Somewhere between the refrigerator hum and the sprinkler, a 9-year column of numbers stood up in my head and reconciled itself, every line finding its true category at last. And the category was not love, and the account was not family, and the balance was not payable going forward. It didn't feel like heartbreak, whatever heartbreak feels like. It felt like the end of a month. I washed my wine glass at the sink, dried it, and set it upside down on the rack. Leave it cleaner than you found it. And I told Ethan I had a work call, which was about to be true. Upstairs in my office, I opened the safe and set the green ledger on the desk, open to the last page, the fresh ink. 7:40 on a Friday evening. Landon Price answers his phone on Friday evenings. I pay him partly for that. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. He asked exactly one question when I finished, the question he's paid to ask. "You're sure?" I looked at the bottom line of the Bennett pages. 9 years of my own careful handwriting, $8,800,000 of fresh ink at the foot of it, and I gave him the answer I should have given 9 years earlier. I've never been more sure of a number in my life. The instruction fit inside one breath. Terminate the purchase. The termination clause I'd initialed like a parking lot seatbelt turned out to be the best afterthought of my career. We were inside the diligence window. The buyer, Townsend Holdings, that is to say me, could walk for any reason or none at the cost of a $50,000 deposit left on the table. Landon read me the number as a courtesy. I approved it inside one breath, and I'll tell you what I told him, because it's the truest joke I've ever made. That's the cheapest Bennett invoice I have ever paid. Notices went out electronically that night. To the seller's attorney, to the escrow agent, to the realtor whose commission had just evaporated between dinner and the 10 o'clock news. $8.8 million began its unhurried procedural swim back toward my account, minus the deposit, exactly as the paperwork always said it could. No shouting, no scene, a signature undone by a signature. People imagine revenge as fire, and I understand the appeal, but fire spreads and fire gets photographed. What I did was closer to plumbing. I found the one valve that fed the whole fantasy, and I turned it a quarter inch to the right, and somewhere across the harbor the fountain on Lagar Street went dry without a single sound. Then, and this is the part people never believe, though every woman who's ever finally decided something will believe it instantly, I went to bed at 10 and slept 8 dreamless hours, better than I had slept in years, in my own house, purchased at 30, titled in my own name, next to a man who slept just fine too, because he did not yet know the world had moved. The weekend was almost tender, in the way last weekends are. Ethan, believing the thing had not been made a thing, was light as a boy. He whistled getting the paper. He held my waist in the kitchen and talked about the honeymoon we'd take somebody someday. And Sunday evening he laid his suit for Brooke's wedding across the guest bed and asked which tie, and I said the blue, and he agreed the blue, and he was happy. Then he said, and I want this sentence preserved exactly, because it's the sentence that finished the job his Friday sentence started. Hey, if anyone at the office asks why you're not coming Saturday, just say you've got a work conflict. Yeah? No drama. Quiet, remember? Quiet, remember. His mother's catechism, arriving secondhand through the mouth of the man who'd promised to love me. She says it to me, and now he says it for her, the way water takes the shape of its pipe. I said, quiet it is, and he kissed my forehead like a stamp on a processed form. Monday and Tuesday I worked my company and my list in parallel. Landon's list, technically, the joint checking we kept for household nothing. My payroll deposits had never touched it. Quietly right-sized. The supplemental card Ethan carried on my account, the one that had bought the tailored suit currently draped on my guest bed, scheduled to sunset at the end of its cycle. Records pulled. 9 years of them. Not out of spite, but out of professional habit. When a partnership dissolves, you close the books properly. And here's what surprised me, doing it. I kept waiting to feel grief, and what I felt instead was competence. I wasn't losing a marriage. I was finally running it like something I was good at. The bomb went off Tuesday at 11:40 in the morning, 11 days before the wedding. I know the time because I was walking a hospital contract floor with a clipboard when my phone began to perform. The realtor had called Sandra with her condolences. Buyer terminated, house returning to market. Such a shame, after everything. Within the hour my screen was a casualty report. 11 missed calls from Ethan. 2 from Brooke, who had not managed a text about her own wedding invitation but found dialing speed now. 1 from a Charleston number I didn't know, which I'd learn later was Sandra's. 63 years old, and the first time the woman ever personally called my telephone was the day her fountain went dry. I let them all ring out except one. I took Ethan's 12th, in a supply corridor that smelled like my childhood, and I held the phone a little away from my ear while my husband asked, at volume, what I had done, what was wrong with me, did I have any idea what this looked like? And I waited for the fizz to settle, and I gave him back his own Friday vocabulary, word for word, in the tone of a man discussing a scheduling conflict. It's money stuff, Ethan. It's one house. Don't make it a thing. The silence on that line was the most honest conversation our marriage ever had. Then I hung up, finished my floor, signed my clipboard, and bought my crew lunch. If you're keeping score at home, say it with me in the comments. Don't make it a thing. Sometimes the most devastating sentence in the language is the one they handed you first. Subscribe, friend. The tea with Sandra is still coming, and you do not want to miss the tea. Ethan came home that evening and auditioned every voice he owned. I sat in the kitchen, our stage, apparently, and watched my husband work through his repertoire like a man flipping through paint chips. Anger first. I had humiliated his mother, embarrassed the family. Did I understand what people were saying? I noted, silently, the verb. Embarrassed. Funny how the family kept that word on a lanyard. Then bargaining. Wire it back. Wall. Just till after the wedding. We'll talk about everything calmly in July. This doesn't have to be permanent. Then the victim. Do you have any idea what that number meant to them, to him, what it was like growing up in a family that had lost its house? His eyes actually shining, and I'll grant it was the most sincere he'd been all night, possibly all decade. I let the whole performance seat itself. And then I asked my one question, the only one I had, the one I'd been carrying since Friday. When your mother called me an embarrassment, I said, and you stood in this kitchen and delivered it. Where were you standing, Ethan? In here? With me? Or out there? With them? He opened his mouth, and I watched the answer arrive in his face a full second before any words could dress it, the way truth always outruns its clothes. He was standing where he had always stood, wherever it was smoothest. He started to explain. Nuance, complexity. You know how she is. And I stopped listening the way you stop holding a door for someone who isn't coming, and very quietly, mostly to myself, I said it again. Got it. He didn't even hear me. That was fitting. He'd never heard that word do its real work. Charleston is a beautiful machine, and that week I got to watch it run in reverse. The disinvitations never come as disinvitations. Nothing in that world arrives as what it is. The preservation board where I held a funded seat discovered, regretfully, a restructuring. 2 couples we'd dined with monthly went quiet as closed pools. The Heritage Society's newsletter ran an unsigned little essay about the difference between donors who give from love of tradition and those for whom, it grieved to say, giving is a transaction. And 3 separate people forwarded it to me with no comment, which in Charleston is a comment. Sandra's hand was nowhere and everywhere, a breeze you can only see in the curtains. I want to be honest about what I did in response, because this is the part I'm proudest of, and it is a list of nothing. I gave no interview. I wrote no post. I corrected no story at no dinner party. I let every version of me they invented walk the streets unchaperoned. All I did was open my recurring payments file, the tidy annual pledges that had been auto-renewing my way into their world for 9 years, the gala table, the garden fund, the lecture series, and I turned off auto-renew. Not canceled. Just not renewed. Each one, as it came due, like leaves deciding it's October. I didn't take my money out of Charleston, you understand. I just stopped subscribing to the people in it who had unsubscribed from me. Marisol asked if I wanted the pledges redirected somewhere. I said yes, actually. Hold that thought. Because an idea had started assembling itself in the back office of my head, wearing my mother's name. But first there was tea. The summons came Thursday. Tea, Broad Street, 4 o'clock. The second time in 9 years the woman had initiated my company, and both times there was an 8-figure house attached. She received me the way she'd received me at the beginning. Silver service, portrait light, wrist pouring. I admired it all over again, the way you admire a glacier from a warm boat. She opened with revisionist diplomacy. There had been, she said, a misunderstanding. Embarrassing was Brooke's word. Spoken in stress, never hers. And she watched me across the teacups to see if the ancient trick would still find the old hungry girl. It found her chair empty. So she moved to the actual agenda, and I'll say this for Sandra Bennett. When commerce is on the table, the woman doesn't blink. Restore the purchase, she said, and she would personally see to it that I had a proper place in this family at last. The wedding, naturally, and after. A proper place. There it was. The seat, offered openly for sale at the exact moment the family finances required it. 9 years of my hinting and hoping skipped in a single afternoon of necessity. I set down my cup and asked her the question I'd waited 9 years to ask. What place, exactly, would that be? The one 9 years and more than $9 million hasn't bought. And Sandra Bennett looked at me, and for the first and only time in our acquaintance, she told me the whole truth. A place isn't bought, dear, she said. That is what you people have never understood. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and thanked her. Sincerely, which confused her. Because she was right. That's the terrible, freeing thing. She'd been right the entire time. Friday morning, 2 weeks after my kitchen learned the word embarrassing, I sat in Landon Price's office above Meeting Street while he walked me through the folder his team had built. Petition for divorce. Financial disclosures? Mine. Immaculate. The company predates the marriage by 7 years. The accounts never touched. The house in Mount Pleasant purchased before the wedding, titled Solo. Not one commingled dollar in 9 years. Landon, who has seen every kind of marital wreckage money can finance, tapped the folder's edge and paid me the only compliment I've ever framed in my head. This, he said, is the cleanest file I have ever closed. Every gift already given, the roof, the tuition, the graves, the car. Gone. Unrecoverable. And I nodded before he finished the sentence, because I'd closed that account myself at midnight over a green ledger. Call it tuition. The truth costs what it costs, and unlike everything else I'd bought that decade, it only bills you once. He asked if I wanted the petition served. Process server. Standard. Tuesday. And I heard myself say no. Hold it. I'll hand it to him myself. Landon raised the one eyebrow he permits himself. I said, he's my husband, and he's going to hear it from me, face to face, in our kitchen. Because that's the difference between me and the family he chose. They subcontract their cruelty. I deliver mine personally, and it isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And he's owed it. Landon closed the folder and said, in his flat flint voice, that it had been a privilege doing business with me for 10 years. Brooke's wedding was the next morning, at the yacht club, under a forecast of flawless June. And on the morning of it, my husband walked into our kitchen holding an envelope. Saturday, 9 in the morning, June light all over the counters. Ethan came down dressed for his sister's wedding. Charcoal suit, the blue tie we'd chosen in another lifetime, boutonniere in a florist's box under his arm. And in his right hand, held a little too carefully, was a heavy cream envelope with gold on it. He set it on the island between us the way men set down peace treaties they expect to be thanked for. Mom changed her mind, he said. You're invited. Everyone's waiting on you, Wall. Brooke wants you there. The whole family wants you there. Beat. And then, in the gentlest, most reasonable, most Bennett voice you have ever heard, the invoice. And if you call Landon today, about the house, then everything's just whole again. Isn't that what we both want? Whole again. There it was then, at last, laid out on my own countertop in the morning sun, the thing I had wanted since I was 29 years old. A seat at that family's table. An afternoon of belonging. Gold foil. My name, presumably, somewhere inside that envelope. 9 years I'd tried to earn it, and here it was. And I want to be very precise about what I felt, because this is the moment the whole story exists for. I felt nothing dramatic. I felt the specific, unmistakable feeling of reading a term sheet and seeing, in plain language at last, terms that had only ever been implied. He honestly believed he was repairing something. That's the part that finally made it easy. In his family's arithmetic, this was reconciliation. The seat restored, the wire restored, everyone whole. Love. Invoiced. I looked at the envelope and then at my husband, and I said, Give me 1 minute. I went to the kitchen safe. There's one thing I haven't told you, because I only understood it myself that week. Deep in the escrow file, stapled behind a title history, Some paralegal had photocopied a stack of archival records about the Lagar Street house, and among them, caught by accident like a leaf in wet cement, was a newspaper clipping from 1986. A society page wedding announcement. One column, small photograph. Miss Sandra Kay of Monk's Corner weds Bennett Eyre. I had stared at it for a long time. Sandra Kay. A waitress at the yacht club, the archive said. The same yacht club where Brooke would be married on Saturday. A girl from a mill and marsh town an hour up the road, with a chin like a consequence even then, who had married into the name 40 years ago and been sanded down by it until not even the K survived. Her biographies all start at the wedding. Her origins were not erased by strangers. She erased them herself, seam by seam, because that was the tuition the Bennetts charged her generation. I took no joy in it. I want that understood. I stood in my kitchen that Saturday morning holding what I'd brought up from the safe, and before I handed my husband anything, I told him about the clipping. She was me, Ethan, I said. 40 years ago your mother stood exactly where I'm standing, holding everything she'd earned, being told what it was worth. And your family sanded her down so thoroughly that she's spent 4 decades holding the sandpaper for the next girl. I don't hate her anymore. I refuse to become her. That's different. And Ethan, my husband, one hand on that gold envelope, honest confusion on his handsome face, said the truest thing he ever said to me. But it worked, Wall. She became a Bennett. I looked at him a long moment. Yes, I said. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. He thought I'd gone to the safe for the checkbook. I need you to know that. Because it's the whole marriage in one detail. Even then, at the very end, watching me open a safe, the story he told himself was that the money was coming. What I'd taken out was a worn green book and a folder, and I stood there holding both. And I ran my inventory one last time, the way I do before I sign anything that can't be unsigned. On one side, everything in that envelope. The seat, the table, the family Christmases with their liturgy of names, the end of eating alone at the edge of other people's belonging. All of it real. All of it available. All of it one phone call away. And priced, permanently, with an interest rate that had compounded for 9 years and would compound forever, because rent never converts to equity in a house like that. On the other side, a quiet kitchen, my own name, my mother's knees on Saturday visits, and the cold, clean fact that I would be, in their world, the embarrassing one until the day I died. I heard my mother's voice, 9 p.m. in a service elevator, 14 years old. Every door, every night. Leave it cleaner than you found it. And standing in my kitchen at 38, I finally heard the whole instruction. She was never only talking about offices. Leave the marriage cleaner than you found it. No debts owed, no debts claimed, no revenge arson, no scenes at yacht clubs. Everything reconciled, everything signed, every account closed at its true balance, swept, wiped, and returned to its owner in better condition than it was received. I set the green ledger on the counter, and I turned it to face my husband. I opened it to the Bennett pages and I slid it across the island, under the June light, until it touched his hand. Read it, I said. And he did. And I watched my husband meet, for the first time, the entire 9 years, in my handwriting, with dates. The Charity Hall roof, $46,000. Brooke's tuition, $118,000. The cemetery where his ancestors lie under azaleas I financed, $27,500. Gala after gala after gala. The car he'd driven to work that very morning. And at the bottom, in ink, 3 weeks old, underlined once, $8,800,000. His face did something I'd never seen it do in 9 years of dinner parties. It stopped being composed. I used to think this book was a love letter, I said quietly, because the kitchen was very quiet. I thought I was writing down all the ways I loved a family that was slow to love me back. Then your mother taught me what it actually is. It's a rent book, Ethan. 9 years, I rented a seat in your family, and I paid on the first of the month, every month, in the only currency you people ever accepted from me. I took the folder from under my arm and set it beside the ledger. The petition, signed, dated, complete. And on top of it, I laid the last thing. The thing I'd carried down in my pocket. My wedding ring? No. That stays. I paid for it, as it happens. A pen. His pen, actually. The good one. For the signatures he'd need. And I said the 3 words I'd been saving since midnight over a green ledger. Paid in full. He looked at the folder, and the ledger and the envelope with the gold foil, his tripled reflection in the marble, and he reached for the one move left in the family playbook. You can't do this today, Wallis. Today is the wedding. I know, I said. I'm not going. I was never invited. Remember? He picked up the envelope then and held it out. Actually, held it out. Gold foil flashing. The seat itself. The whole 9 years of wanting. Arm's length from my hand. And I looked at it. And I felt the old hungry girl look at it. And I put my hands, both of them, calluses up, flat on my own counter, and left them there. That seat's off the market, Ethan. The woman who was paying for it retired this morning. He stood in my kitchen a moment longer, an envelope in one hand and a ledger in the other, a man holding 2 versions of the same family and realizing they had never once been different. Then he checked his watch. He actually checked his watch. He was due at the club. And that, right there, was the eulogy. The door closed. The house went quiet. My quiet, bought and paid for and mine. And I said it one last time, out loud, to no one, and it finally meant what it should have meant 9 years ago. Got it. The petition was filed Monday morning. The divorce took 5 months, which is what happens when there is nothing to fight over, because one party spent 9 years refusing to blur a single line. The company, untouched. It predates him. The house, untouched. It predates him. The gifts, gone. Gifts are gifts. The law and I agree, and I'd already booked them where they belonged. Tuition, expensive, paid once. Ethan kept the car. If you're wondering how I feel about that, go back and read the ledger line where I bought it. Landon called our settlement conference the shortest of his career. Opposing counsel spent most of it reading my disclosures like a novel he wished he'd written. The house on Lagar Street sold that fall, full ask, to a 34-year-old software founder from Austin who, I'm told, hosts barbecues in the garden and flies a college football flag off the historic gate on Saturdays. I did not plan that. God has a sense of humor. Mine just runs quieter. Sandra remains chairwoman of everything. The story in circulation, I'm told, is that I left because I never really fit in, which is, when you think about it, the only completely true thing that family ever said about me. And Brooke's wedding, by every account, was flawless. I sent no gift. First time in 9 years. It felt like stretching. Remember the pledges I let lapse, and the idea assembling itself in the back office of my head? That spring it got a name, the Dell Townsend Scholarship Fund, for the children of custodial and janitorial workers, first generation to college, 40 scholarships the first year. We held the award ceremony in a rented union hall with folding chairs and sheet cake, no gala, no gold foil invitations, no donor wall. And my mother handed out every certificate herself in her good blue dress while 40 families took pictures. A reporter asked me afterward what the endowment totaled. I said we don't discuss numbers, and I heard Sandra's voice in my own mouth and laughed harder than I had in a year. Because it turns out a name really is quiet when it's the right name on the right building. Here's what nobody tells you about giving without buying. It's cheaper. Not the checks. The checks are the same. The interest. Nothing compounds against you afterward. Marisol runs the company as president now. I kept the chair and my Saturdays. I drive upstate, and my mother makes chicken and rice, and no one at that table has ever once glanced at my hands. A financial magazine called last month. They're doing a piece on, quote, the businesswoman who walked away from Charleston philanthropy, and would I care to tell my side? I declined, politely, and wished the reporter a good afternoon, and sat for a moment with the phone in my hand, smiling at nothing. Money is loud, Sandra told me once. A name is quiet. She was half right, which was her lifetime average. My money did finally go quiet, the day it stopped begging. But the quiet was never for sale in that city, at any figure, because the quiet isn't purchased. It arrives, unbilled, on the first morning you have nothing left to prove to anyone, and it stays. Last week, at dusk, my mother and I closed up the little storefront office the foundation rents. Dell Townsend, 61, bad knees and a spine like rebar, insisted on doing the front windows herself, because she doesn't trust anyone's streaks but her own. So we did them together. Her inside, me outside, matching hands on matching glass. The radio going low, the way it went 30 years of nights ago. Except this time, the name on the door was ours. Here's the only wisdom I've got, and it cost me $9 million. So take it free. Anywhere that only values what you can pay will bill you forever. And the people who love you for free are the only ones you can never repay. That's my story. One empty mailbox, one green ledger, and a seat I finally stopped renting. If you've been paying, in money, in silence, in pieces of yourself, for a place in somebody's life, take this as your sign to check what the lease is really costing you. Share this with someone who gives too much, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.